All right, and we are live. Okay, so in this workshop, we are going to be talking about efficient and profitable remediation with React Extract. That doesn't negate the effective part either, as you will see. Before I do that, let me talk a little bit about PPE. When it comes to mold remediation, when it comes to using any oxidative chemistries and things like that, safety is of the utmost importance. One thing that I am going to demonstrate in this session that I didn't put into this is I want you to see this is the connection between our Lakeland 15 mil nitrile glove, which is a long glove, and then this is the push lock system here. As you can see, I've already threaded it through this sleeve. And the way that this works is once you've got that cuff integrated with your suit, right, you're just, everything's right there as one unit, basically, right? There's no taping of this seam. And even normally I pull hard on this because normally I'm dealing with a Chemax, but you know, that's not coming off while you're working with it, okay? All right, so I'm gonna use that because even though I'm just doing a little bit of application work over here, I don't want it on my wrist either. We're gonna primarily focus on two products for this demonstration, but then I'm gonna show you some different cocktails and things of that nature because while mold remediation is where we started, and like the Enviroguard brand can sometimes be synonymous with mold remediation and mold preventative types of chemicals and coatings and things like that. This system actually allows us to do the same sort of a neutralization reaction for fire damage, for biohazard, even for black water cleanup and things like that. Anywhere where you've got a high soil load, this works perfectly for, and it'll leave you with a neutral surface, meaning that you don't have chemical residues on that surface either. And while I'm talking about chemical residues, we're used to working with OEM equipment manufacturers so that while most chemicals on the market are disclaimed from their warranties, people have whole websites set up that say, you know, you can't use a quaternary ammonium chloride on, you know, this type of, you know, plastic building material, whatever it might be. We always provide letters to the manufacturers talking about neutralization, and that's how we get around the compatibility issues. So if you're ever working in a construction project and anything is brought up about compatibility with chemicals, let us know. We'll gladly put together a letter for you and direct it to any of the OEM manufacturers that might be concerned. And so we can answer their questions and guide them toward neutralization. Okay. All right. So before we get into the actual protocol itself, I think it's important to kind of take a step back and examine what are the goals of remediation in the first place. And the way that we came up with this diagram here was I was at a Starbucks in Washington, D.C. with a customer one time. And we were talking about, you know, the basic goals of remediation. I said, like, I'm a very visual thinker. So I said, in my mind, this is like an upside down pyramid where the goal is to gradually, but in a controlled way, reduce the amount of mold in an environment, right? And that's what it all comes down to, because whether we're talking about, you know, setting up containment, air scrubbing, HEPA vacuuming, everything that we do is gradually reducing that concentration down from the environment in a controlled manner. Anybody disagree with that? Okay, so that's how we got to making this kind of visual for everybody. Now, on top of that, we've got to consider what is our issue to begin with, right? So we always talk about condition 1, condition 2, condition 3. Of course, condition 1's where we want to end up at the end of a remediation. That's when our mold levels within an environment are at or preferably lower than the exterior ecology surrounding that environment, right? Condition 2 is when we have elevated levels, and of course, condition 3 is when we have visible mold growth, okay? So I think if we kind of set some baselines for this, then as we talk about what our goals are or how we're matching up to that with React Extract, everything begins to make some sense. Now, I think anybody who's been through like AMRT is very familiar with S520 and the HEPA sandwich, right? And the HEPA sandwich allows us to do exactly what we were just talking about. Finally get to the point where anything that's loose in terms of particulate is vacuumed in a controlled way from that surface before there's any cleaning that takes place. And then the fragments that are on the other side of that cleaning process, be they spores or any other part of the hyphal structure, etc., are then vacuumed up at the very end to just give us a visibly clean and dust-free surface. And if you're familiar with S520, each of the statements that I'm making are derived directly from S520. Okay, here's how React Extract parallels exactly what we're doing in S520 and the HEPA sandwich. So we begin with HEPA vacuum the way that you normally would anything else, followed by the react part, okay? That's when we are applying oxyprep and oxypar to the surface, and we're getting that neutralization reaction, which I'm going to demonstrate in just a few minutes here. Then on the back side of that, the extract side is done in the wet stage, because as you're going to see, all of the soil load gets pulled to the surface in the foam that forms, because the natural question is, like, isn't a two-step process more time-consuming than a one-step process? But if we step back into the normal process, a lot of times what you're dealing with is cleaning that surface through scrubbing, through wiping, all these sorts of things, maybe several times on a surface, and it's very manual to get to the point where that surface has to dry before re-HEPA vacuuming, versus we react extract on the surface and vacuum in wet stage everything off the surface, okay? And that moisture, instead of having a HEPA filter, acts as our control, our containment, just like you would with asbestos. They use moisture to control asbestos migration. Same thing here. We're making sure that no particulate gets airborne, and the moisture is doing that for us during the wet stage of extraction. Does that make some sense? Okay. All right. So when we get over into the remediation system itself, then what we're seeing is an efficiency that develops, depending upon if we're going pump spray or if we're going electric, of between 40 and 70% more labor efficient than a traditional, let's just say, scrub model. Efficacy, if you look at the efficacy, and we're on the cleaning side of things, we can't just like pass out third-party documentation. But if you ever want third-party documentation of efficacy, where some of the larger remediation companies like Lee Ramey's company, Mold and Mildew Solutions down in Birmingham, Alabama, has done just head-to-head comparisons of all the remediation systems and products beside one another, you can clearly see how React Extract provides for superior efficacy at that increased efficiency, and then profitability, because 2 to 3 jobs can be done for every one job that's done in the traditional method. If your pricing doesn't change, if you're able to do 2 to 3 more jobs in the same period of time, or 2 to 3 times the jobs in the same period of time, obviously it's a game changer in profitability for companies practicing remediation. Okay, so we get to this mold remediation side of things. I just wanted to kind of show you some basic products and tools that we'll be talking about here. Now, of course, oxyprep and oxypar are a given. Oxyprep, by the way, a lot of people think of oxyprep because they use it for as a stain remover. But for the React Extract process, it's not only a stain remover, but it sets up the reaction, right? Without it, we're not going to get that reaction, which is what gives you your efficiency. Then the oxypar side is our stabilized hydrogen peroxide product in oxypar LR. Sure, could it be used by itself if you didn't have any staining, if you just had small tasks to do and you weren't as concerned about efficiency? Absolutely, all day long. But these two together are going to give you the highest efficiency overall, which is going to dramatically change your labor. Now, I put this drum here with the two motors on top as an example of something that's become very common, at least for React Extract customers, and that is being able to travel long distances and not lose CFM in a vacuum. Okay, this system can be set up with HEPA filters, right, on the front side, but with both of those motors on, it can reach 200 feet into a crawl space and attic space, things of that nature. Because what we desire to do is not have chemicals and equipment in your way when you're working. It's like all of the equipment's over there. We just have lines running in at that point in time, right? Which keeps everything out of the way. It keeps the job nice and organized, and a organized job is a profitable job. Okay, so that's why we show that Nitro system there. A lot of people, as they go beyond those couple jobs per week, find that the little bit of investment, I think those things are around $1,200 or something, goes a long way in improving the efficiency of the job site. All right, so then we come to the OxyPrep product. And by the way, OxyPrep can be misted, sprayed, or even foamed onto surfaces, okay? So depending upon what kind of control that you want, you have the option of changing tips out on the sprayer side of things, but keep in mind that we could go to like an FI Junior, which is a foaming unit, and if we wanted to create a longer dwell time with the product, we could foam that onto surfaces as well to increase our dwell time. So there's all these little things that if you had a foamer, a spray rig, and ways of misting, you can create efficiencies and efficacy across the board with just a few key pieces of equipment. Likewise, OxyPar, if anybody's familiar with the peroxide side of things, because we not only make OxyPar LR, which is our 8% stabilized hydrogen peroxide, but we make a 20% stabilized in what's called our SuperPar product. Both of those products have those unique benefits of peroxide where you can identify, by identifying, meaning that, let's just take this for an example over here, right? We've got a moldy piece of wood, and on the right-hand side, I've got a pump sprayer that has some OxyPar LR in it right now. It's already pressurized. So when I hit this piece of wood, okay, you're going to see, and I don't, let me just move back over here. I don't know if you guys can see it, but at the top of that wood, it kind of lights up immediately bright white, right? And that helps you visually identify from a technician standpoint, what's the contamination load organically like on a surface, okay? And so it's that initial identifier. Then it allows you to lift and suspend. When I talk about lift and suspend, I'm talking about the soil load, to lift and suspend that from surfaces. And then with React Extract, it's your neutralizer as well. That means we're not going to have to worry about corrosion problems on metals or anything of that nature. Or, again, I had mentioned I have a textile background in chemistry, right? When you are bleaching fabric, if you don't neutralize that fabric, you're going to end up with fabric that just falls apart on you. Well, cotton is cellulose. Wood is cellulose. We don't want to put chlorinated products onto a wood product like I see many people do in attics and things like that without neutralizing that, right? It's just bad for the material itself, not to mention the pipes and everything else around it. So OxyPar is, you can think of it any way that you want to. Yeah, it can be used standalone as a peroxide-based cleaner, as we're looking at there. But when you're thinking about React Extract, think of it as your neutralizer, okay? And again, this product can be misted, sprayed, foamed on to the surface, again, depending upon the kind of dwell times that you're looking for. All right, so before I get into the different cocktails, I now want to back up and just show you two ways of running React Extract. If I have a high soil load environment, which I would consider that a fairly high soil load environment with limited staining, one way that you can run React Extract is that you can apply your OxyPar. Let me get over here one more time. You can apply your OxyPar to the surface first, right? And that's going to equally wet out that surface, and I can neutralize in the other direction with OxyPrep, right? So no matter what, one is the neutralizer for the other. kind of think 360 degrees on it, the opposing chemistries. Okay, so that when I hit the surface, then with OxyPrep, I'm immediately getting that neutralization reaction that occurs when those two products interact. And what you see that begins to develop is all that foam begins to lift everything to the surface. If I were to take, if I had a white rag, you'd really be able to see it, but if I were to take a rag and wipe this off and show that to you, that's all your mold, right? Suspended within. Hey guys, I'm just walking away for a quick second right here. I'm just showing this, what we call soil load. All right, so there's your soil load in the foam, right? So just imagine how much more effective it is to vacuum extract, right? Because wiping, is time consuming. You're going around splinters, you're going over nails, all those sorts of things, but extraction is much more efficient, and you're not potentially wiping soil load back into the substrate. Because how far can you go with a wiper before you end up actually cross-contaminating what you just covered? Extraction, you're much less likely to cross-contaminate what you've just worked on. All right, so then we could go the opposite way with this. And on this side, we've got our OxyPrep. Okay. All right. And I don't know if you can smell it back there quite yet. It should smell pretty fresh. Like if that fragrance begins to kind of waft out here. Well, what I'm using there in OxyPrep is a product called Sorbicist. Okay, Sorbicist is a product that's made of essential oils, but we had to find something that would cover basically any chemical odor that we ran into and leave behind a really fresh fragrance. And this is quite I would call this like the Google reviews product, okay? What we tell people to do is don't tell your customer that you're gonna leave it smelling fresh and clean. Let them experience it when they get home. And they will talk all day long about how when they return to the home, how fresh their home smelled, to the point where one of our customers out in Colorado, Rockstar Restoration, did this in his mold remediations for attic jobs out there. And the agent asked if all new homes going on the market, if he could run a fogging service with this and just make those homes smell really fresh and clean for all the new homes that went onto the market. And so it started a new service for him. He fogs real estate's new listings now, so they smell really fresh when people come into those new listings. Can you smell that now? Okay, it smells really good. So we just add that to the front side of things. Okay, so we've hit it with OxyPrep. And now we come back in the other direction with OxyPar. Now, you go, wait a second. I thought that was supposed to like really foam up and give me this like release of soil load. Sometimes when we're in a heavy soil load environment, the OxyPrep, it's an oxidizer, right? It's releasing an oxygen molecule, which is what does the work in an oxidative situation. It uses it all up, mitigating the staining that's on the surface, okay? So when we have a high soil load environment, which you shouldn't after you HEPA-vac, but we didn't HEPA-vac these surfaces, right? We would expect that you're gonna run into something like that. And so we would just run the opposing OxyPrep over this one in this circumstance, right? And now we get that reaction, okay? And then the same thing is going to happen here, where that soil load is going to come to the surface for extraction, okay? Does that make some sense? Now, yesterday we were on a job that was a fire damage job. Let me see if I can do this with gloves on. Okay, and we can run React Extract for fire damage as well. The difference is that we do a 50-50 combo of our grease gobbler product with OxyPrep, pre-treat with that, and then we run an OxyPar over, and that's what lifts and suspends the soot on the surface. And likewise, we would use that same cocktail for something like a trauma and crime scene cleanup application, or we would use that same cocktail for gray and black water applications, right? Because in all of those things, getting a clean surface is first and foremost. And when we started talking about this, I mentioned disinfection and dwell times, and the fact that you had to have a clean surface before you could disinfect the surface. So this brings us to the cleaning side of things, and then we can wrap back around and then use Deutreon products. These are 1 gram tablets for like just trigger sprayers and things like that for disinfection. Okay, and I talked about accessory products. We looked at Sorb-Assist here. I mentioned earlier Speed Zero. As cooler weather starts to set in, and you begin to see surfaces get cold and more difficult to clean, you can add Speed Zero to those. And by the way, these people sometimes like the 8 ounces because they're just convenient for jobs. You can throw it in your pocket or whatever and just have a little bit with you. But these also all come in 1 gallons with a 1 ounce pump dispenser on them. So I had mentioned earlier that small packages are expensive packages. So if you find yourself really liking Sorb-Assist, if you find yourself really liking something like Speed Zero, we can provide you with the gallons and pump and plungers and everything to go along with that. Okay, any questions about React Extract? That really went much quicker than I anticipated it. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us for this workshop, and we will see you at noon for the next one. I can't remember what that is, but Grace can tell you. We'll see you soon.